move on to the second session by Dr. Bhaskar Mukherjee, and the topic is Neurobiology of Behavioral Addiction. To start the second session, I invite Dr. Naresh Nibhinani. He is the Associate Professor, Department of Psychiatry, AIIMS, Jodhpur. He is also the Honorary Editor of Journal Committee, Indian Association of Child and Adolescent Mental Health. And he has about 154 research items. The next chairperson is Dr. Gaineshwar Sharma. Can we have his slide, please? Can we have sir's slide? Dr. Gaineshwar Sharma, he is the professor and former HOD, Department of Psychiatry, RIMS, and then JENIMS, both in Imphal. He is a retired professor of psychiatry, Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute. He also has a WHO fellow on de-addiction and rehabilitation. He has also been a WHO fellow for community psychiatry and published and presented various research papers in different national as well as international papers. I invite both the chairpersons to kindly join us on the dais. I request Dr. Gaineshwar Sharma, sir, to kindly introduce our speaker, Dr. Bhaskar Mukherjee.
In serious mental disorders, publication more than 10 published research paper. I request Dr. Bhaskar Mukherjee, anyone to speak, my co-chairperson. Shall I invite Dr. Bhaskar to continue the speech presentation? If the co-chairperson has to talk, I pass on to him.
Let me share my screen. Thank you everyone for having me here. First, let me correct a few things. My interest is not biological psychiatry because biological psychiatry doesn't exist. There is no biological psychiatry. Psychiatry is biological. You haven't had biological nephrology. You haven't had biological cardiology. You haven't had biological endocrinology. So why should there be biological psychiatry? Psychiatry is a medical subject, and so by its place in medical field, it is biological. So there is no biological psychiatry. Psychiatry is biological. Every part of psychiatry is biological. With this, I would go to my presentation. So my today's topic is process addiction and neurobiological basis, as well as some part of its treatment. First, we have to understand what is process addiction. I would go to process addiction via a roundabout way. First, I would explore where is actual addiction process. Then I would explore the neurobiology of total addiction process, and from there I would try to explain what is process addiction actually. In case you are wondering, process addiction is the correct scientific name of behavioral addiction. So what is addiction? Addiction is a primary chronic disease of brain's reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Though the circuitry is responsible for production of addiction, addiction is actually also a neurogenetic disease. It starts as neurodevelopmental trait and it manifests it in very early stage of human development. Yes, there is another variant which happens after midlife, but that is a different thing, and I would talk about it later when the time comes. So the phenotypical expression of drug use or phenotypical expression of overuse of any pleasurable activity is ultimately just a behavioral expression of this group of disease. The addiction is actually expression. The main disease is hiding inside the brain cells and their interconnections. So how this group of disease, just a minute. How this group of diseases are formed? In very basic word, addiction develops when the neocortical reflective brain cannot inhibit the older reflexive brain areas. Means our brain is actually the pinnacle of animal evolutionary system in brain. Yes, people would argue that dolphin has more brain areas than us. Yes, people would argue that our brain is not very different from many of the other anthropoid apes. But where our brain excels is adaptability. The adaptability of human brain is tremendous. Human brain can adapt to most of the environment of this earth, be it tundra, be it sub-Saharan Africa, be it anywhere. It would find a way to adapt and evolve. This is where our brain excels. Now, for that, different part of our brain needs to work in tandem. Now, some part of our brain is reflexive. It acts without consideration. This part is what forms our motivation, our impulses, and other things. Previously, older neuroanatomists used to call this part mammalian brain or reptilian brain. That's not true because that is a faulty way of representing it. But still, this reflexive part is common to most of the animals. Now, neocortex is the controlling part of our brain. It reflects. It doesn't act reflexively. It reflects. It reflects on environmental situation and what we can do decide based on the various environmental inputs, and then it decides what to do and what not to do. So when the reflective brain, that is neocortex, cannot control the basal urges of older reflexive brain areas, then we tend to overdo things. And anything we overdo consistently is termed as addiction by society. Yes, it's a very broad definition. You would say, so is someone who is highly dedicated is addict? Yes. Neurobiologically, from brain's point of view, that person is also addict. But society accepts that person as normal because our concept of addiction is based on social ideas. Addiction of psychiatry is not based on brain, is not based on neurobiology, is not based on neuropathology. It's based on social ideas. That's why previous to 1800th century there was no addiction. All the so-called addictive substances, all the so-called addictive behaviors were common in 1820 and things like that. Opium used to be a drug of almost miraculous activity. Same goes for cannabis and various other addictive substances. All the so-called addictive habits, let's say overuse of sex was normal, perfectly normal. Compulsive sexual activity, compulsive gambling was perfectly normal. Then society decided that these are the bad acts, these are the good acts, and we started venturing into addiction, and we created a mess out of it. So when seen from brain's point of view, overdoing anything chronically or repetitively is addictive. So what are the actual motivation which makes a person do a thing repetitively? They are together called reward seeking motivations. They can be food, water, basic needs. They can be social needs, which can be sexual gratification, which can be personal attachment, which can be playful environment, and which can be artificial stimulation, which is actually that so-called drugs. You see, or anyone who has a genetic tendency to overdo things can do excessive food intake, excessive water intake, excessive food intake, and that person would be called binge eating disorder. That person would not be called addiction, because society doesn't see that as that harmful. What a wonderful thing for our medical profession. Then a person who has excessive drinking, psychogenic polydipsia, it has become a obsessive compulsive related disorder. It is not an addiction. Society thinks so. Where is brain here? The basic need, compulsive sexual act. Again, this is addiction, this is obsession, both. Society doesn't think so, but brain thinks that. Personal attachment means excessive attachment to family member, excessive attachment to various things and hoarding. These are classified under obsessive symptom. But seen from brain's point of view, these are addictions too. Excessive reading, excessive gardening, anything done excessively is personal attachment, including excessive spirituality. So today's gurus, today's various spiritual enlightenment seekers, they are in a way addicted to. Now playful environment means enjoyable activities. So all the enjoyable activities is, if overdone, can be addiction. So we call a person who is playing 14 to 15 hours and computer game addict. Why? Because society says so. But we don't call a cricketer who is playing for 14 to 15 hours. Why? Because society says so. Where is biology in it? Where is science in it? Any idea of science in today's addiction psychiatry? No. Addiction psychiatry is a morality and society driven branch. There is no science in addiction psychiatry. Otherwise, we psychiatrists would have been the first person to resist gaming addiction, because gaming is a profession now. And this is a step for which we would have to apologize to future, just like homosexuality. Anyway, so comes the neuroanatomical considerations. I would just skip to this. I would give a schematic view, because otherwise I would not be able to elaborate the area of behavioral addiction much. So the brain areas involved in formation of addiction are almost every brain areas are involved, because brain works in total. There is nothing, no behavior, no thought, no motor action that happens only singularly. Brain works in tandem, in total, in everything. But the following brain areas, they are more involved in maintaining of addictive trait. These are basal ganglia and its various connection, reward circuits and its inputs, cortical executive circuits and the projection of theirs into various parts of brain, amygdala and its various connection, thalamic complex means thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, subthalamus and its connection, cerebellum and its various connection. This is the very common picture of Coop. The color-coded ones are the areas implicated in binge or intoxication phase, withdrawal and negative affect phase, and preoccupation and anticipation phase. You can see that this is a preliminary attempt. The actual picture is much complex. I am not going into detailed explanation here because I have to explain behavioral addiction in a much broader term. This is the basic reward circuit, very basic because reward circuit involves much more. Reward circuit in its total would involve cerebellum, would involve various association cortex, would involve various brainstem nuclei. But still, this is the very schematic picture of reward circuit and their inputs. These are the two main areas of motivation that control the reward circuit machinery. One is misery fleeing, this side, and its various level of control, and reward seeking. I would suggest do not remember everything. Remember that nucleus accumbens is the ultimate common pathway here, and through nucleus accumbens both work. Cell nucleus accumbens and core nucleus accumbens form the common pathway. This is how Havenular pathway actually control addiction. Havenular is the principal feedback mechanism for reward circuit. There are other feedback mechanisms. For example, the deep brain nuclei, the hypothalamus, epithalamus, say other parts of epithalamus and subthalamus, but Havenular so far has got the most interest of all the neuroscientists. Lateral Havenular and medial Havenular. Medial Havenular projects to interpedunculae nuclei and that projects to various parts of brain. You can see this is another pathway, endocannabinoid pathway. Endocannabinoid pathway is being explored slowly, and just like endo-opioid pathway, endocannabinoid pathway plays huge role in addiction, in various other body function, in immunity, in coagulation system, and even in pregnancy. I would give you a often repeated interesting fact. Many of you have seen that during antidepressant treatment, your patients conceive more frequently, or many of the patients who are having infertility treatment comes to you, gets antidepressant, and then conceives without any kind of infertility treatment. And some of you might have wondered why. The answer lies probably in endocannabinoid system. Most of the antidepressants are direct or indirect modulator of endocannabinoid system. Now, endocannabinoid system is responsible for receptive suppression of maternal immunity during fetal implantation to maternal uterus. So, when endocannabinoid system is enhanced, the fetal implantation in maternal uterus gets enhanced, and many of the patients who has implantation failure would get benefited from antidepressant therapy. That might explain why many of our patients conceive naturally while on antidepressant treatment. Now, endocannabinoid system through ventral tegmental area, prefrontal cortex and nucleus accumbens produces a big role in maintenance of addiction and anticipation. Now, when we talk about addiction, we have to understand that addiction is high motivation for anything coupled with wrong judgment. This wrong judgment part is part of neuroeconomics. Neuroeconomics means when our brain takes various decisions, these decisions are modulated by our learning, our value system. Value system means not social value system or internal value system, along with various inputs and methods available to us. Brain takes a dynamic decision based on all these things, and depending on situation, some of these decisions work, some of these doesn't. And brain learns from it and repeatedly allows the learning to modify the further decision. Sometimes what happens in addiction is brain first take a faulty decision. That decisions get brain some tangible instant reward, and then brain goes on seeking that reward repeatedly, and addiction is produced. So inherently addiction is also a result of faulty dynamic decision making process, and that is part of neuroeconomics. So what is our schematic decision making process? This is a schematic diagram of that. I want all of you to remember this picture. First is representation of problem, means whenever brain is facing a situation that is represented as a problem to brain, and brain seeks what are the set of feasible action, the internal states which says how many actions can be taken, and the external states. Let's say someone is feeling hungry during a meeting, so that person would consider the feasible actions of going out of the lecture room or suppressing the hunger, depending on internal state, whether the person is in a well-fed state or not, whether the person is in fasting or not, and whether the external situation allows the person to go out of the meeting or not. And based on these, each of the different action would be valued. Each of the different action would be given an emotional value, internal value, and the external value, and that value would decide for brain which action brain would select, and then brain would evaluate the outcome, and each of these stage would be learned and would be applied for future action. These are the various brain areas that are involved in this process. The value judgment can be divided by two parts: reward anticipation or punishment anticipation. Reward anticipation is ventral striatum, punishment anticipation is amygdala, and value judgment itself is done by mostly orbitofrontal cortex. Then the person would approach a function or avoid a function. For approach or avoid, go or no go signaling is done by dorsal striatum. Then outcome evaluation would be done by anterior cingulate cortex or orbitofrontal cortex. Then reward predicting error, RP is reward predicting error, that whether that would be positive or negative, means the anticipation or punishment would be overwhelmed by the reward or not, would be calculated by Venn diagram, and value computation would be done by orbitofrontal cortex or anterior cingulate cortex, and then action would be selected by ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and the cognitive control will be provided by anterior cingulate cortex and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And this would again be part of value judgment by orbitofrontal cortex. That is how our brain takes dynamic decision making. And any problem in any of these areas would give rise to problem of excessive involvement in any action, so-called, or addiction. So these are the various cognitive impairments in various so-called questionable addictive activity. Compulsive sexual behavior has attentional bias. Gambling disorder has motor as well as compulsivity as well as attentional bias. Binge eating disorder has all three. Internet gaming disorder has more attentional bias and impulsivity rather than compulsivity. But again, these are very early results, and this has been done on a very specific subpopulation. If we do a large scale trial, these results may involve impairment in all the areas, all the cognitive areas, all the behavioral areas, and all the motor areas. So after this, after understanding the external phenotype, the dynamic decision making process of addiction, we come into molecular biology of addiction. Again, I am not elaborating it because if I elaborate it today, it would take 3 or 4 hours and the whole CME would cancel. So for any addiction, nucleus accumbens is the central point. This represents the common pathway. I have told it before. So in the nucleus accumbens, by incentive stimuli or natural reward, it actually mediates the reinforcing effect of drugs of abuse or behavioral. Behavior means feeding, drinking, sexual behavior, exploratory locomotion, various other activity, anything that is pleasurable would fall under motivated behavior. So all our so-called behavioral process, behavioral addiction or process addiction would fall under motivated behaviors. Now, mesolimbic process would produce positive reinforcement of that behavior and that substance, and motor responses would increase in magnitude and vigor, would produce reward event, and that would in turn produce more human motivation and more human drive would be there for motivated behavior, be it any motivated behavior, and all this is produced by some common molecular genetics part, and that leads to aberrant behavior. This is true for everything, means anything where motivation is involved, there the same pathway will follow. So the genes of addiction are also genes of all impulsive act, including suicide. The genes of addiction are also genes of all high functionality part, means it is actually part of mania. Now, so if we decide, we cannot, rather I would say, we cannot decide or cannot say these are genes of addiction. We should say these are genes which causes sustained motivational behavior in any domain. This is actually the central dogma of biology and how we are going about it. We have just understood slightly this part, the genomics. We have a long way to go. Epigenome, we don't have much idea about epigenetics, transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics. We have not much idea about these things. So to understand that this part is true for both drugs and behaviors. So any drugs of abuse or overuse of any pleasurable process would produce the same thing. It would produce various transcriptional change and epigenetic change, and ultimately would produce various ways through which some genes would be silenced, and ultimately there would be long lasting adaptive change in neuronal function. This is a detailed pathway. This is how various dopamine receptor, NMDA receptor, AMP receptor, they modulate on sustained stimulation. They modulate the gene through calcium calmodulin complex, protein kinase, citrulline 1, and causes increase in BFOS and decreases in CFOS, and ultimately that causes long-lasting change in postsynaptic neuron and long-term potentiation of learned addictive behavior or behavioral addiction. Same goes for substance addiction. These are the drug-activated gene, and someday we are actually already trial is going on. Someday we are planning to block this one, delta phos B, to produce change in addictive behavior. So after understanding all these things, now we can say we have a definitive understanding of what is behavioral or process addiction. It is actually another expression of endophenotype of impulsive compulsive behavior in the spectrum of normal personal behavior to addiction. Means it's a spectrum. The spectrum consists of impulsive compulsive behavior, and at one end there is person who is passionate about anything. That includes me, and that includes most of us who are listening to this webinar, because unless you are passionate about something, you cannot reach to a position in your chosen profession. As we all have reached to a level in our profession, all of us have. So we represent, some of us represent normal spectrum, then there goes the other ones who are overdoing it, and ultimately those who are excessively doing it and who are not able to live without it.
Excuse me, Dr. Banerjee. It's a little 5 minutes.
Okay. So,
Complete the presentation.
yeah.
Okay.
So it is the intermediate phenotype, deficient internal control, aka executive circuit dysfunction. Means there is executive circuit dysfunction, and that causes all the so-called behavioral or process addiction. So it is the first step. All the addicts of so-called substance, they are also behavioral addict. They are using some other process excessively. Along with that, they are using some substances. They are able to wane themselves off from that substance. They are going to continue one or more behavioral processes as addictive behavior throughout their life. Behavioral addiction is actually the quintessential first step. This is the concept of endophenotype. Endophenotype is an intermediate step between genotype and phenotype. I am not going into details because I don't have much time, but all these addictive behavior are actually endophenotype of addiction. And this is how they have juvenile population presence, unaffected relative presence, spectrum disorder presence, and ultimately presence in disorder. So what this discussion tell us about treatment of behavioral addiction? Process addiction should better be reconfigured as part of compulsive impulsive disorders along with obsessive compulsive spectrum disorder in the full spectrum of normalcy to addiction. The ones doing pathogenic work in area represent the normalcy end, and addiction represent substance abuse represent the other end. Pharmacotherapy of behavioral addiction, if based on neurophysiology, would be drugs to reduce attentional bias, means all the stimulant, atomoxetine, methylphenidates, drugs that reduce impulsive behavior, means naltrexone, nalmefene, the zonaminerol, and drugs that reduce compulsive behavior, means SSRI. Based on neuroanatomy, drugs that increase executive control against stimulant, drugs that modulate kappa and mu opioid receptor, naltrexone, nalmefene, and various other partial opioid agonists, and drugs that modulate endocannabinoid pathway. Sadly, we only have dronabinol, and that is not available in India. Based on neurogenetics and epigenetics, drugs that inhibit histone deacetylase. Histone deacetylase inhibitor is valproate. Also, some other anti-epileptics like topiramate. CYP2 inhibitors, almost all antipsychotics have CYP2 inhibitor activity, but it has its inherent dangers too, because CYP2 inhibition can give rise to metabolic syndrome. Drugs that promote demethylation and prevent methylation of genome and histone. Again, all our so-called antipsychotic antidepressants are actually promotes demethylation and prevents methylation and hypermethylation. Drugs that enhance CRB and CFOS, again, these would be the antidepressant drugs, so-called antidepressant drugs. Psychotherapies based on neurobiology, any psychotherapy, because all psychotherapies are same. They are just same person, just wearing different clothes. They differ only on mode of administration. Rest action on brain is same. They increase the threat appraisal system and they causes systemic hallucination, so the so-called placebo pathway. So this ends. I am hoping for some quality interaction.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhaskar.
Please carry on. Please carry on.
Yeah, please. I'm sorry, earlier there was some network issue at my end. Dr. Bhaskar, thank you very much for the comprehensive presentation on a very complex area. Very important question is asked by Dr. Arvind Brahma. How neuroeconomics is responsible in compulsive sexual activity? Would you like to respond, sir?
Yes. Let me give a stage-by-stage idea of compulsive sexual activity in terms of neuroeconomics. First, let's see the problem for the human being, be it a male or be it a female. And high sexual desire. So, what would be that person's actions? Compatible sexual partner or any sexual partner. Now, depending on that person's learning, that person's previous experience, and that person's internal value, that person might choose a commercial sex worker, or that person might choose a extramarital relationship, or that person might choose the dedicated partner. Then, depending on that action, job would do the preferable activity with the preferable partner, and based on that feedback, decide whether in future that person would do the function or not. Means every compulsive sexual activity person would first start with their designated partner. Let's say if that person is married, then the first sexual relationship where the person would do excessive sexual activity would be either the spouse. Then if spouse is not available or spouse is not agreeable, then that person would choose for an extramarital relationship, and if that doesn't work, would go for sexual activity. Then based on these, the person would go for paid sexual activity or marital relationship frequently. So this is how a compulsive sexual action can be deconstructed on neuroeconomics way.
Over to organizers, since we have questions because of paucity of time, as our organizer convey us.